from our studios on Florida's Gulf Coast. This is Women of Grace Live. Join us today as we discuss issues important to your life and faith. Spiritual insight, compelling discussion, practical wisdom. Women of Grace for such a time as this. Now, here's Elena Rodriguez in for Jonette Bankovic.
It's so good to have you here on EWTN Radio's Women of Grace. Welcome, welcome, welcome with big capital letters. And this is a show where you can call in and participate, be right with us here, like if you were here with us in the studio. That's pretty cool, isn't it? All you have to do is pick up the phone. We'll give the numbers in just a moment. Jonette Bankovic sends her best. She can't be here in the studio, in the radio studio, because even though she is at EWTN, she's on the television set taping Women of Grace television episodes, and at this time she cannot join us live, but she sends her best and her promise for prayers for you. Yes, for you. She may not know you in person. That doesn't mean she can't pray for you, because she does, and we hope that you pray for her as well. We ask you to pray for Jonette Bankovic and all the television crew, her great guests on the TV set, and you'll be able to see the product of all that hard work going on this week here on the EWTN television side. You'll be able to see that on television pretty soon. And Jonette will be with us very soon to tell us all about the tapings and, her cheerful self. So in the meantime, we're going to have a wonderful hour here, and we are very blessed to be able to talk to Brandon Vogt today. He is our guest for the entire hour. You can call in with your questions. Brandon is going to be talking about how to bring your spouse back to the faith. Sometimes it is hard because you want your spouse to come to church with you and you just don't know what to say or what not to say because you're afraid if you say the wrong thing, it's going to push him or her farther apart. Or maybe your spouse is beginning to explore the faith, and then you have also the children. Maybe if you have children, you may have some teenagers saying, well, I don't want to go to church because mom doesn't or dad doesn't. And so this is a real problem we face every day. And also practicing faith outside of church. What about prayer before meals? So all those interesting and important topics we are going to be discussing today with our guest, Brandon Vogt. You can call in with your questions. Our call screener, Matt Gubinski, is ready to take your calls. We have 6 lines open there for you to call in. The number is 1-800-585-9396. That number again is 1-800-585-9396 to call in with your questions about how to bring your spouse back to the faith, or how to bring a loved one back to the faith as well, because Brandon Vogt has a lot of experience in that area. If you're listening outside the United States or Canada, you can call in too. We have a special international line for you, and that line is country code 1, then dial 205-271-2985. Again, our international number is country code 1, then 205-271-2985. 2985. Brandon, welcome to Women of Grace. We are delighted to have you.
Elena, it's my joy. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know it is a topic near and dear to your heart because the Lord has planted this seed in you many years ago to go out and evangelize and especially talk to the people who are far away from the faith. You have experience bringing young people back to the faith, teenagers and college-aged students back to the faith as well, and energizing them and actually challenging them to take the faith seriously on their own, not because mom and dad said so, but on their own. We know that you have a lot of experience as well in writing blogs and books about talking to atheists and bringing them back to the faith and getting them to think seriously about the faith and the importance of the existence of God in our lives. And of course, we know that you have a lot of experience with bringing spouses back to the faith. Brandon Vogt, for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with him, is a best-selling author, blogger, and speaker, and he also works as the content director for Bishop Barron's Word on Fire Catholic Ministries, and he is a married man with a wife and 5 beautiful children who are lovely, and so he has a lot of experience as well in inner family relations, and he has done a lot of writing. He has books and writing on bringing people back to the faith and the dialogue with atheists, as we said earlier. So a wonderful resource to have you here on the show, Brandon, and we are waiting for our phone calls to ring right now. It's 1-800-585-9396. While you start dialing that number, 1-800-585-9396. Brandon, let's start the conversation. What really is the problem when we have one spouse in a family relationship, one spouse practicing the faith, going to church and practicing the faith outside of church as well, but the other spouse is looking entirely in the different direction? What is the problem with that?
Sure, I think most listeners can probably intuit the problem, which is it sends a mixed message, not only to the children in the home, but people in the extended family, people outside the family, friends. You know, it sort of implies that, well, you know, if religion makes you happy and is good for you, then all power to you, but it's not really doing it for me. And so at the core, what it does is it subjectifies religion. It turns it into just a personal preference, and the kids pick up on that. They see, well, mom likes it, dad doesn't, so I'll just choose whether I want to do it or not. And if it's easier and more comfortable not to go to church, then that's the most likely option.
And what can we say, or what is your experience when we hear statements like, well, you know, going to church is something that you have to do because you want to do. So if it doesn't come spontaneously to you, then you might as well not go because you're not being legitimate going. So what really does this mean for the interfamily relations when we say, well, I'm not going to go because I don't feel like going today?
Yeah, the first thing I do is to adopt a strategy used by the good folks at Catholic Voices. They have this principle called positive intention. And that involves anytime you have a discussion about faith or morals or politics or any controversial subject, and there's obvious disagreement, the first thing you should do is to find something in the other person's position to praise or to affirm, because there is always something. There's always some seed of truth or goodness or nobility that you can find and praise. So, for example, if a child says, you know, I don't really want to go to church, and if I go, I won't really want to be there, so I'll sort of be a hypocrite if you just make me go just because I have to, but I don't feel like it. I think the first response, using this positive affirmation approach, is to say, hey, I think you're totally right. You know, I think that if you see no good reason to go to Mass, then it would be somewhat hypocritical to go and pretend as if you did want to be there. So I'm with you there. But let's talk about the Mass. Why do you think it's good to go to Mass? You know, obviously hundreds of millions of Catholics around the world find some value in it. So what do you think they appreciate about the Mass that you might be missing? So I think that's a more positive approach than just saying, get in the car, you're going. You know, I think having a conversation about why the Mass is valuable, what it offers to us, namely an encounter with the living God, which can't be found anywhere else, that's where the conversation has to begin.
So personal witness and personal enthusiasm plays a great deal in how you invite somebody to join you to come to church.
Yeah, I would say so. If your child picks up that you yourself see no value to going to Mass and you just go out of obligation, then again, that's not going to be incredibly persuasive to them. They'll say, well, if you're just going out of duty and you really find no value in it, then why would I want to go? But if they could detect that the Mass is having a tremendously positive influence on your life, if they see it change you, if they see the ways it affects you and gives you joy and peace and a connectedness to God, then they might crave that too. So you're absolutely right that personal witness is perhaps the most powerful element of this equation. Your children are always watching you. They're always watching your mannerisms, your reactions, and so your attitude and your witness perhaps carries more weight than anything else.
You're listening to EWTN Radio's Women of Grace, here coming to you live with our guest Brandon Vogt, who has extensive years of research and experience in helping to talk to people about coming back to the faith. And we are talking specifically about how to bring your spouse back to the faith, And also, we're going to include in that element, of course, children, and especially teenage children who sometimes start getting a little bit smart, maybe, and they start questioning things, which is good that they question. But how do you engage them in being active in their faith, even beyond going to church for Mass on Sunday or Saturday evening Mass, to actually participate in other family faith expressions like praying together, maybe prayer before meals? Give us a call if you have a question, if you know somebody in this situation, because Brandon Vogt has a lot of experience to share with you. The number is 1-800-585-9396. The number again is 1-800-585-9396. We do have a line open for you to call if you are outside the United States or Canada. You can also give us a call through an international line, and that is country code 1, then 205-271-2985. Again, our international line is country code 1, then 205-271-2985. You are listening to EWTN Radio's Women of Grace. We're going to continue talking about how to bring your spouse back to the faith and why it is very important to do so. Women of Grace continues in a moment.
Hello, friends. If there was a program that could help your daughter, granddaughter, niece, or student to come to realize the gift of her femininity and the beautiful reality of who she is in the eyes of God, would you be interested in having her participate? Would you be interested in helping her and other young women to participate in it? I hope the answer is yes, because that program is now available for young women. Women of Grace is delighted to launch our newest Women of Grace study program, Young Women of Grace, Embrace Your Femininity. This beautiful study for girls ages 12 through 17 teaches young women what it means to be a daughter of God, to discern their purpose and mission in the world, and to find true fulfillment without losing their souls. Young Women of Grace presents vital Catholic teaching in a colorful magazine-style workbook that is packed with fun facts, testimonials, and stories of the saints and other Catholic role models. Transform the life of that special young woman and order a copy today. Visit womenofgrace.com or call 800-558-5452. That's womenofgrace.com.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak.
The church has 2,000 years of wisdom to share on what it takes to live life gracefully.
We're so overwhelmed by how much our faith has transformed our marriage and family especially. We want everyone to experience the incredible gift that the Catholic vision of life and love really is.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak. Weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
12 minutes past the hour here on EWTN Radio. You're listening to Women of Grace, coming to you live. This is Elena Rodriguez sitting in for John at Bankovic today with our guest Brandon Vogt, and we are speaking about how to bring your spouse back to the faith. What to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, what might be pushing them farther away. And Brandon, in this, it's a complex situation. And of course, every situation is a little bit different. So we can't really say, okay, this is a formula that will cover, it's a blanket solution for everybody. But in a general recommendation, what is your experience when a mother, for instance, is facing the situation of a teenage boy or girl saying, I don't feel like going to church today. Daddy's not going, so why do I have to? What do you answer to that?
Yeah, I'd say a few things in response. One is that Sunday morning is probably the worst time to handle that conundrum. So you don't want to be getting into any sort of debate or negotiations right before you head out for Mass. What you need to do is address that issue at some other point during the week. So if that happens this Sunday, figure out a temporary solution, move on. But then a couple days later, you might want to bring the situation up again with your child and say something like, hey, I know that this past weekend you really didn't want to go to Mass, and particularly because Dad didn't go, but also I'm guessing you just don't find any reason to go to Mass. Is that right? Ask your child to explain why they don't want to go to Mass. What is it that either pushes or pulls them away? Chances are, and this has been my experience talking with lots and lots of young people about the Mass, chances are they just don't understand what the Mass is or what it's about or what it's intended to do. And so, as I mentioned earlier, they just see no value in attending Mass. So that's the crux of the matter. That's the sort of thing that you need to unearth in a discussion with them. You need to help reveal to them what's really going on at the Mass. You need to help them catch the vision of the brilliance and splendor of God coming to us and offering himself for our sake through the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist. And once they begin to catch even a glimpse of this vision, suddenly it becomes something intriguing, not something that I just have to go to put in my time each week, but something that I'm intrigued to experience.
Very interesting. So it is a thoughtful process. It's not something that should happen, as you said, just 15 minutes before we're supposed to leave to go to Mass in the morning of Sunday, and everybody's going crazy, getting ready, and of course everybody's nervous because they're trying to make the time. So that is a very good strategy. If this hits home, call in, ask Brandon Vogt your question. The number is 1-800-585-9396. Our number again, we have a line open and it's for you. 1-800-585-9396 here on Women of Grace. Brandon, you are a man of faith yourself. You're a married man with 5 beautiful children. What is your recommendation for the case when it's actually the husband trying to bring the wife closer to the faith, maybe not ready yet for going to church, going to Mass together, but he's trying to get her to think about the existence of God and why it's important to practice our faith. What are your recommendations, man to man?
Yeah, I wouldn't presume to offer a definitive answer, but I would recommend probably the same couple things that a parent can do to help win a child back to the church, namely the brilliance of personal witness. So you need to radiate the fact that you've been converted by an encounter with Jesus Christ, that your life is different in a positive way. It's better because you go to Mass and because you've met Jesus. So personal witness is the number one key. And then second, I would open up some of these gentle conversations about faith and about God, conversations where you do more listening than ordering or mandating and saying you need to go to Mass. You might lead with questions like, I know you don't really find faith compelling, but what do you think is the best argument for God? Or what do you think is the strongest reason for going to Mass, and why don't you find it persuasive? So those sorts of leading questions to sort of draw out what are some of the big obstacles or roadblocks that are keeping your spouse away from the church. I think those two poles are the best approach, personal witness and gentle dialogue in which you listen more than preach.
Yes, listen more than preach. Words to live by, literally. 17 minutes past the hour here on EWTN Radio's Women of Grace. We are talking to our guest, Brandon Vogt, about how to bring your spouse or your loved one into the faith. And you can call in with your questions, 1-800-585-9396. The number again is 1-800-585-9396. And if you're outside the United States or Canada, you can dial our international line, which is country code 1, then 205-271-2985. That international number again is country code 1, then 205-271-2985. 2985. Brandon, we have Margaret calling in from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, listening to EWTN Radio through the online platform. Margaret, what is your question for Brandon Vogt? Go right ahead.
Hi. My question is, I have a niece who is no longer practicing her Catholic faith. She has three boys. 2 of them have received communion, their first Holy Communion, and do not practice. And her youngest one, who will be in 3rd grade, she has not signed up for, what is that, Catholic education when you're in public school. She has not signed him up for that, and therefore he will not receive his first Holy Communion, which I can't believe that it's gotten to this point. That is my first question. Can I encourage her? Do I offer my assistance in taking him to CCD classes? Do I offer to take him to CCD classes? How do I encourage her without pushing her further away? My sister, her mother is practicing, but she She says that she's done everything that she could, and it's up to them now, and I feel differently. That's my first question.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Margaret. It sounds like it's a very delicate and complex situation. I think your proposal is probably the right one, is to maybe offer to help shuttle the child back and forth, make it as easy as possible for him to be able to receive the religious education. I think that's probably the best approach. Chances are, and tell me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the mother's perhaps more ambivalent about it than anything else. She's not necessarily against him receiving it. She just doesn't see the need for it, or it's not a priority in their lives. And if that's the case, that could be a good thing, because it means there's no real resistance. It's just, it's not a top priority for our family. So if you could step in and make it easier for him to attend, I think that would help. So that'd probably be the way I would approach it, the same way you proposed.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. That makes me feel so much better. My second question is, my goddaughter is with a man. They are not married. They have two little girls together, and I have talked to my niece several times about getting back into the church, and she smiles, and she says that the girls would not be good in church, and I've offered to take them with me. I just recently found out that she is going to sign the girls up, and they are getting back into church. But what can I do to encourage her partner to get on board with what she is doing?
Yeah. Can I ask a clarifying question? Again, is the partner more ambivalent, or is he resistant to what she's doing?
She's just ambivalent. There's no resistance. It's just, I think, something that her partner has not done. She has not kept up with her faith. It's now that she has kids, I think she wants to get back into it. But it's not that she's against it, as you said. She's just, que sera, sera type thing. It just doesn't fit into their schedule, I believe.
Yeah, so I think, again, to use the same approach as with the previous question, I think offering to make it easier for her to get her kids plugged back into church is probably the right approach, because it sounds like it's more of just a priority issue than there's some obstacle or stumbling block. So it sounds like she's moving in the right direction. If they've already signed up, she's maybe getting a little involved. Make that easier for her. Offer her, say, hey, I'll come with you to this next event, or I'll take the kids to this so you don't have to. Anything you can do to ease the burden of the logistics would probably help.
Oh, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you so much. God bless you and everything that you do.
All right, you too, Margaret.
And God bless you, Margaret. Thank you very much. Listening there in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. You can call in with your questions as well. We are speaking here on Women of Grace with Brandon Vogt about how to bring your spouse or a member of your family, a dear loved one, back into the faith. The number is 1-800-585-9396. That number is 1-800-585-9396. We're going to Chris in California, who is listening to EWTN Radio through Sirius XM 130. Chris, what is your question for Brandon Vogt? Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I would love to get some suggestions on how to keep an active 8-year-old engaged during the Mass each week. I have 2 children, and my son is constantly moving around, saying he's bored, and we do our best to have him follow the readings in the gospel and all that, and try to even whisper in his ear and explain kind of what's going on during the Mass, but still somewhat challenging week to week. So I would love any thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. We got 5 kids, and our oldest is 7, so just a year younger than yours. So I know exactly what you're talking about here. Again, I won't presume to give a definitive answer, but let me offer 3 suggestions. First of all, one thing that's been helpful for us is we use the Magnificat. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's produced by the same company that makes Magnificat, which is the monthly booklet that has all the readings, everything that goes on during the Mass. And they produce a children's version called Magnificat. It comes in the mail like once a month, and they give you like 4 different booklets, one for each Sunday. And the child brings that with them to Mass, and then it helps them follow along. So it's got little pictures, and it's got the actual readings so they can follow along with the readings. So we found in our family that that's made a huge difference because it gives the child something tangible to hold and to use during Mass, something to center their focus. So that's recommendation number one. Number two would be during the week, so not on Sunday necessarily, but during the week, see if you can have short conversations about the Mass, maybe about particular elements of the Mass. Talk about what's going on during the Eucharist, maybe reenact it in your house so he understands what the priest is doing and saying and what the meaning is of each of these elements. If the child has no understanding of what's going on with Mass, then we can't blame them for being disinterested. It'd be like you or me going to an opera without any sense of what musical themes are going on, without even being able to distinguish between the brass or the winds. It would be totally incomprehensible and boring. So we need to understand what's going on. So help your child to understand that during the week. There's lots and lots of good books for kids on the Mass, lots of good resources online for kids about the Mass. So that'd be the second recommendation, is help them gently and slowly over time to understand what's going on at the Mass during the week. Finally, this was a sort of a light bulb moment for us, is we've started practicing during the week having time of quiet, focused prayer. So in our family, we say the rosary every night. We do different rote prayers, and that's great. Our kids love that. We've fallen into a good pattern here over the last several months. But in addition to that, we've started saying, okay, before we do our rote prayers tonight, we're just going to sit still for 2 or 3 minutes, and we're going to speak to God. We're going to listen to God. We're going to try and hear God in our hearts. Training your children to be able to sit still in quiet prayer during the week produces wonders for Sunday, because by the time Sunday Mass rolls around, your kids will already have had the experience of quiet contemplation, of sitting and listening for God, either in their minds or through the readings at Mass or whatnot. So those would be 3 things to try out. 1, maybe pick up the Magnificat. You can Google that and find it online. 2, focus on the Mass during the week. Help your child to have at least a basic understanding of what's going on. And then 3, see if you can cultivate short moments of silence through the week, sort of as a practice for the longer moments of silence on Sunday.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Chris, there in California for that very important question. We go to Maria in Dallas, Texas, who is listening to EWTN Radio through the Guadalupe Radio Network. Maria, what is your question for Brandon Vogt? Go right ahead.
Hi, this is Maria, and I have a question. It's kind of difficult for me to talk about. So my son grew up in the faith. I was with them, involved in church youth group and Sunday school. And then as soon as he turned into high school, he decided to go to work for another church. And I don't know. I don't think that I could get him back. And so my husband also, he tries to encourage him, but I think that he is kind of on the fence about it because he doesn't know what to do either. So I don't know what to do.
Well, thanks so much for calling in. I mean, we can hear the pain and the concern in your voice. And so, first of all, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened. I'm so sorry it's caused you to despair and worry. I can't imagine how difficult it must be for you. Let me offer a couple of things in return. One of them would be not to give up hope. I talk with parents a lot about children who have left the church, and so similar but not analogous directly to your situation. And one of the things that comes up again and again is sort of the same words you use, which is, I don't see any way that they could possibly come back. It's an absolutely hopeless situation. And so one of the things that you need to realize right off the bat is it's never hopeless. God wants all of your family to be with him in his church even more than you do. He will go to any length to draw your family members back to the church. We see this in the prodigal son story, that the father is pacing, looking out at the horizon, waiting for the son to return. And then even at a glimpse of him, he races out to meet him and embrace him and welcome back. So the Father is always, always looking and waiting to draw people back to him. So don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. The second thing I'd encourage you to do is pray not only for him, but pray that the right people in his life come in and maybe help him re-examine the Catholic Church. Maybe it won't be you, maybe it won't be your husband, but maybe it'll be somebody else who helps him sort of catch the light once again. So those are the two bits of advice I'd give.
Thank you very much. You're listening to Brandon Vogt. He is an expert in recommending how to bring people, especially your dear loved ones in your family, back to the faith. In a moment, we'll continue talking to Tiffany, Pam, Mike, and you. The number is 1-800-585-9396 here on Women of Grace, which continues in just a moment. Stay tuned.
The Christian life on earth is a warfare. As baptized Christians, we are called to be soldiers of Christ, warriors in the kingdom family of God. I'm Thomas K. Sullivan, author of the book Called to Knighthood and designer of the Warrior's Rosary. St. Padre Pio said, "The rosary is the weapon for these times." Manufactured by premier Italian rosary maker Gorelli in Italy, this one-of-a-kind designed Warrior's Rosary brings together the elements of military combat and spiritual warfare. Each piece is custom designed to embody the reality of a spiritual warrior in the kingdom of God that every baptized Christian is called to be. This rosary features a warrior saint from different parts of the world on each of its Our Father medals. Let us ask in faith for the strength, the grace, the wisdom to engage in this warfare with the rosary. Get yours today at EWTNRC.com.
Hello, friends. I'm Janet Benkovic, and I have great news for you today. Did you know that becoming a Women of Grace member is simple, affordable, and valuable? For only $8.95 per month, you are entitled to all Women of Grace and Abundant Life television episodes, plus all of our radio podcasts, all of our archived webinars, and all of our conference and retreat audio and video presentations. In addition, you'll get a 20% discount on all of our store products and so much more. Plus, by becoming a member of our Women of Grace subscribership program, you help us to support our missionary apostolate. Become part of our Women of Grace family by visiting our website today at www.womenofgrace.com. Subscribe to all of our apostolic tools for such a time as this, right there at www.womenofgrace.com.
Hi, this is Barbara McWiggin.
This is Bishop Joseph Bambera of the Diocese of Scranton.
I'm Brian Patrick, EWTN News Nightly Anchor, and you're listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
"32 minutes past the hour here on EWTN Radio's Women of Grace, coming to you live with our guest today, Brandon Vogt, who is an experienced author, blogger, and speaker on topics of bringing people back to the faith. And we are specifically talking today about bringing your spouse back to the faith, or a dear loved one, your child, or your goddaughter, godson, or a close member of your family back into the faith, or maybe someone who has never really experienced or shown many practical manifestations of faith, how to bring him or her back to the faith as well. This is Elena Rodriguez. I'm sitting in for Janet Benkovic, who is taping television episodes of Women of Grace here on the EWTN campus, and that's why she cannot join us here live on the radio studio, but she will be back with us later. And in the meantime, we continue talking with our listeners about their questions, how to bring people back to the faith. You can also listen to this simulcast, webcast on YouTube. If you go to EWTN Radio's YouTube channel, the way you do that is you go to your search engine and type in youtube.com, and then in the search bar type in EWTN channel, and that'll take you to our live webcast of Women of Grace. You can listen to the show there. If you are maybe in the office or don't have a radio close to you, that's another way you can listen to Women of Grace. We go to Tiffany, who is in Indianapolis, Indiana, listening to EWTN Radio through Catholic Radio Indy. Tiffany, what is your question for Brandon Vogt? Go right ahead, please.
Hi. I was raised in the church, and then I left for a while, and this past year I just felt a calling to come back, so I've been going. However, my husband is not completely on board with it. He with himself going. He's kind of on the fence about believing in a higher being, not really sure if it's God. He takes more of a scientific approach to everything, and so he will go if I ask, but it's just kind of uncomfortable, and I really want him. It was never part of our relationship either, so it's just kind of new this past year. So I'm wondering how to get him more on board and how, get him to believe more in God rather than taking a scientific approach.
Great question, Tiffany. Thanks so much. It's actually right up my alley because I deal with these sorts of questions all the time. Elena mentioned that I run a website called strangenotions.com, which brings together atheists and Catholics to dialogue about the big questions of life, including many scientific questions. So let me offer a few bits of advice. One of them, I think your first strategy should be to hone in on why your husband doesn't believe in God. So what's keeping him from believing in God? Maybe he thinks there are reasons why God doesn't exist. You said he might believe in a higher power. Maybe he doesn't think that that higher power is equivalent to the God of Catholicism for some reason. But see if you could have some conversations gently and non-threateningly to figure out what's holding him back. Is it that he thinks there are good reasons not to believe in God, or does he just think alternatively that there are no good reasons to believe in God? Those two things aren't the same. So first figure out what's holding him back, what's keeping him from faith. Secondly, you mentioned a couple times that he's more scientifically minded. That's fine. That's great. Many great Catholic saints up and down the history were scientists. In fact, when you examine the founders of many modern scientific disciplines, you'll find a large number of them were friars and monks and priests and Catholic leaders of all stripes. So there's no conflict between being a Catholic and being a fan of science. I'm a fan of both, and so is the Church. So maybe help him see that there's no dichotomy between those two fields. One great resource that you might want to give him is a very short booklet. It's only 20 or 30 pages long, and it was written by my friend Trent Horn. Trent is an apologist at Catholic Answers, and the booklet is called 20 Answers, Faith and Science. And it walks through the 20 most commonly objected criticisms of the Church from a scientific perspective. So things like science has disproved God, or there's no evidence for God, or the Church doesn't like science because it tortured and imprisoned Galileo. So how do you respond to some of these common scientific objections? That's what that booklet will provide. Finally, you might want to browse the website I mentioned earlier, strangenotions.com. We have lots of great articles from different Catholics on how to approach unbelieving friends and family, particularly those with a scientific bend. So I think those resources will help you out a lot. So try to do those three things. One, figure out exactly what's holding your husband back from belief in God. Two, maybe talk about how the Church and science aren't in conflict. And then three, find some good resources like that booklet I mentioned or some of the articles at Strange Notions that you could either share with your husband or just use in conversation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiffany, listening there in Indianapolis. And you can call into with your questions for Brandon Vogt. We are speaking about how to bring your spouse back to the Catholic faith. And that website that he mentioned is strangenotions.com. It's a place of dialogue between Catholics and atheists, a very good resource when trying to bring an atheist or somebody who's really, really falling away back to the faith and get him engaged actively. The number to call is 1-800-585-9396 here on EWTN Radio's Women of Grace. We go to Pam, who's listening in Great Falls, Montana, to St. Michael Radio. That's how she listens to EWTN Radio. Pam, please go ahead with your question for Brandon Vogt.
Yes, Brandon. I've left the church when I was 17 and came back 13 years ago, and my heart just desires and craves the Lord every day. And recently, about 2 years ago, we got a new priest at our parish after being blessed with one of the most wonderful priests ever. And this priest kicked us out of the church, out of the parish, that told our vicariate that we left the parish, which we never did. And now I can't get my husband nor my 19-year-old daughter, who was very devout, to go to church. And in fact, in 13 years, I have missed 4 masses just in the past year because things just aren't the same. And I know we're trying, and my big thing is, how do I encourage my husband to not think of it in a man? Don't blame it on Mother Church. It wasn't Mother Church that did this. And our faith, it was, an unfaithful man.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and again, we hear the pain in your voice. I don't want to get into the specifics of what happened at that parish, but I will say this is an extremely common problem. Mother Teresa, in fact, once said that often we Christians constitute the worst obstacle for those who try to become closer to Christ. So what's the biggest thing keeping people away from the church? Often Christians, us. And I've heard time and again from people who have been hurt by people in the church, whether it be a priest or a fellow layperson, and it can be very difficult to disassociate that experience with the church itself. It's easy to think, oh, I had a bad experience with one priest or one parish, and therefore the whole thing is a rotten egg. I think the tactic you need to take, and it's difficult, I won't pretend it's easy, but it's to help your husband and your daughter disassociate that experience from Jesus and the church, to show that the reason why that was a bad experience is because it's incongruent with the teachings of Jesus. That priest didn't act in a Christ-like way. And so what you need to do perhaps is find a new parish or a new place of worship around you where you can experience Christ-likeness in the leaders and in the people. That's the only way to heal that wound that you obviously experienced in your past parish. So, again, not an easy answer, but I think it's the only way to move past this issue, is to help them to see that one bad experience isn't indicative of the church as a whole.
And, that's about where I think that we're headed, is back to a different parish. But, that's our family. That's been our family for 13 years. And that's how I look at it. And many of our family have left, from the parish. And it has been hard. And it's not only affected one parish in this diocese, in this city, but all of them. And so I just keep telling him, who knows the Bible as well as Jesus? And I keep hoping that that's kind of that kind of helps him. And then my daughter's recently asking about the body and blood, and, and I'm just I'm devastated over that. And so I'm just I just think that this was just such a bad experience. I don't know how to get everything back that they know back into their head.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're moving in the right direction, maybe considering moving to another parish. Again, remind yourself and your kids the reason that you're going to Mass is not to encounter a particular priest, but to meet Jesus Christ. And that's true whether you're in a bad parish with bad preaching, with mean people. That's just as true there as it is in the best parish in the world. You will always find Jesus in a valid Catholic Mass. And so wherever you're worshiping, that's the point of it. So keep reminding yourself that, and maybe help talk with your children and your husband to see that as well.
Well, and I know they see the hurt in me, and that's where they go, and it just is starting to cause a conflict. And so I'm just willing to do anything that will keep them loving the Lord in the manner that we were taught. And
great.
So thank you so much for taking my call and helping me with that.
Oh, thank you. God bless you.
God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Pam. God bless you too there in Great Falls, Montana. You can call in to speak to our guest, Brandon Vogt, here on Women of Grace. And the number to do so is 1-800-585-9396. That number again is 1-800-585-9396. 585-9396. It's 44 minutes, almost 45 minutes past the hour here on EWTN Radio. In about 15 minutes, I want to invite you to stay tuned, because Take Two with Debbie and Jerry will begin for an entire hour, and you can call in and participate with them. Their show is called Take Two, as you very well know. Today they'll be talking about social justice. Very interesting. That's Take Two at 12 p.m. Eastern in about 15 more minutes with Jerry and Debbie, so make sure to stay tuned here to EWTN Radio. We go to Mike in Odessa, Texas. Mike is listening to EWTN Radio through the Guadalupe Radio Network. Mike, your question for Brandon Vogt, please.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My question is, or this is my situation, my fiance and I, we used to celebrate Mass together, and she fell away from the church and started attending another church with her family. And I've indicated to her how important it is for us to worship as a family. We don't have children, but I do have a 9-year-old that whenever she does come with me, we go to Mass. And I've told her before, how important it is for us. And her response is, as long as we're both serving the same God, I don't need to be tied to any one religion. So I struggle with it, and I pray for her. I've looked up on Catholic Answers forums, and I don't know what else to do. You got any suggestions?
Yeah, I do. So first of all, thanks for the call, and your situation's not uncommon at all. In fact, I think it's probably the prevailing view in our culture that, hey, all religions are basically the same. They're all just different paths up the same mountain. So you just pick whatever works for you, and I'll pick whatever works for me. That's kind of the prevailing sentiment today. But there are a few things wrong with that. First of all, Christianity, we're not even considering any other religion right now and how it disagrees with other religions, but Christianity, above all, makes a radical and distinctive claim, namely that Jesus isn't just one religious or moral teacher among many. He's not like the Buddha who came to show a way, or Confucius who came to show us the path to happiness. He says, not I have a way, but I am the way. And elsewhere, he makes himself equal to God. He heals people, he forgives sins. Ultimately, he's resurrected from the dead. So this is somebody radically different than the founder of any other religion. So I would maybe talk with your fiance first to help her to see how Jesus is something different than any other religion. Now, when we take it one level further and discuss, well, okay, so I see how Christianity is different than other religions, but what's the difference between going to a Catholic Mass or going to an evangelical church or a mega church? That's all pretty much the same, right? We're just worshiping the same God. Well, again, let's look at what Jesus did. Let's look at the claims of the Catholic Church versus the claims of other churches. And I think the fundamental one is this: did Jesus establish a church? We see very clearly in the book of Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, that Jesus says to Peter that you are Peter, and on this rock I shall build my church. And so nowhere does he say, you are Peter, and I'm going to write a set of writings compiled into a Bible and give that Bible to you, and then you can read and interpret that Bible how you want. He says, I'm going to build my church on you. Later, he tells Peter and the other disciples that they can speak and teach in his name, that they can forgive sins in his name, that they're to baptize in his name. So he gives marching orders to this very church. So once we agree that Jesus established a church, the next question to ask is, well, which church today, since there are many churches, is the one that Jesus established? And to me, that's where the Catholic Church shines, because it's the only church that can trace its lineage all the way back to Jesus Christ himself through the succession of the bishops, which have a straight line back to the apostles themselves and finally to Jesus. We know that the Catholic Church is the only one that didn't start 100 years ago or 200 years ago, but finds its roots 2,000 years ago in Jesus. So that's a very condensed, short version of the sort of conversation or the case that I would make to your fiance, is to try to help her see, number one, that Jesus is different than any other religious founder. Number two, that the Catholic Church is unique and that it's the only one that can authentically trace its roots to Jesus. And therefore, if we want to worship Jesus the right way, we should join the church that he started, and that's the Catholic Church. Finally, here's one little twist, is to maybe focus in on the Eucharist. The Eucharist is something that she can't get in any other church. You know, the Orthodox have valid sacraments. They believe in the real presence, and some streams of Anglicans do too. But other than those, no evangelical church believes that the Eucharist is really the body and blood of Jesus. Most of them just believe it's just a symbol or a sign or a metaphor. But you can't receive Jesus, body and blood, except in the Catholic Church. So help her to see that difference. Even if she disagrees with it, at least help her to see that there is something distinct, something unique about the Catholic Church that you can't find anywhere else. And maybe that'll get her intrigued enough to explore it deeper.
Let me tell you, I failed to tell you that I have used all those great points that you just brought up. I have, and I still can't get through her.
How would she respond to some of these points? Is it kind of just ambivalence, or does she disagree with one or more of them?
She doesn't. I mean, it usually kind of almost leads to an argument because I'm trying to, everything that you just said, I've told her, and she's just not receptive to it. And she said she doesn't get anything from the Catholic faith. And I said, well, you don't go to go get entertained, I've used that. You just got a wafer and some grape juice. You only do it once a month, maybe, and she's just not. I don't know. She's not receptive to any of these points, the points that I've brought up.
Yeah, well, I'd say hang in there, keep praying for her, and maybe try to divert this discussion away from what can I get out of church. It sounds like you're maybe heading in that direction, which is good. Because it probably is true that maybe the new church she's going to has better preaching and better music and better community than the parishes she experienced growing up. That may be true, and in many cases likely is. And so you're not going to win that battle. You won't win by maybe getting her to believe that she'll get more out of the Catholic Church. Instead, transition the discussion back to these fundamental questions about who is Jesus. What did he establish? He established a church. Where is that church? Well, it's the Catholic Church. And then at that point, you can help her to see, well, even if I had a bad experience at parishes, even if I found them somewhat unfulfilling, nevertheless, to whom else would we go? To echo Peter's reply to Jesus. If this is the church Jesus established, where else would I go? So maybe try that tactic, and again, keep praying for her. A lot of these reversions and conversions take a long time. They don't happen after just one or two discussions, but maybe you've already started to plant some seeds that will later flourish and help to lead to her coming back to the church.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you there, Mike, very much. In Odessa, Texas, we go to Colleen, who is listening in Maryland to the EWTN radio network online. Colleen, we have just a couple of minutes before we close the show, but what is your question for Brandon Vogt? Go right ahead, please.
Brandon, thank you so much for taking my call. Your voice is so kind. I just had to tell you something on my heart. I was wondering about my brother. Has pretty much left the church since his divorce. It's very hard for him to even talk about God or pray. If I mention that we could pray for his ex-wife because he's still upset with her, or that I'm praying for her, he's almost angry at me, and it's getting very difficult because it seems like it's getting worse. And I am praying for him and trying to be gentle about my faith, but it does come up, and he's just very resentful right now.
Yeah, thank you for calling and for giving that story. Again, it's not uncommon. I hear this almost every day. So number one, you're not alone. Number two, I wrote a whole book for this exact situation. It's called Return, How to Draw Your Child Back to the Church, and it's designed to help draw adult children back to the faith. So you can go get a free copy of that actually at freereturnbook.com. So we only have a minute left here. I'd encourage you to go get that book because it really does walk you through a comprehensive path on how to draw somebody like your son back to the church. So check it out at freereturnbook.com.
Thank you.
And thank you there very much. Well, Brandon, the time has flown, and we come to the end of our show here on EWTN Radio. I want to thank you once again for dedicating so much time and all your research actually throughout the years to bring people back to the faith. That's a very noble ministry. Thank you, and God bless you, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Elena. It's been fun.
And I want to invite our listeners to tune in to Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. We will have our guest Martha Fernandez Sardinia talking about something very, very, maybe you haven't heard of before. Remember you are loved. It's very important. Why is this important? Why is it important to remember you are loved? And why are you loved? What is the deep root of that reason for which you are loved? Don't forget to stay tuned for Take Two with Debbie and Jerry, talking about social justice today here on EWTN Radio. My thanks to my call screener, Matt Gabinski, doing a great job there with the phones. This is Elena Rodriguez asking you to always keep encouraging other people in the faith. God bless you. Always stay tuned to more of EWTN.